Welcome back, everybody, to the Tommy Stone Show. I hope you're doing good. Today's episode is going to be a jam-packed episode. We have a ton to talk about, but the first thing to talk about is the Iran ceasefire. This bogus deal that Trump negotiated on Twitter with the Pakistan Prime Minister is starting to fall apart already. J.D. Vance went to Pakistan today, met with the Prime Minister, and met with Iranian officials, and was trying to come to real terms for a real ceasefire and a real peace deal. Well, he came back and he reported that Iran is not going to stop their nuclear weapons program. They are refusing to listen to one of U.S.'s non-negotiable demands, which is that Iran can have no nuclear weapons. However, Iran is struggling to agree because in these peace deals, America still wants to leave on the table all of the proxy battlefields that is going on around Iran, essentially allow Israel and the United States to continue bombing places like Lebanon. Iran is obviously going to say no to this, and that's why they want to continue having their nuclear program. But again, the whole hoax and the whole flaw of this whole argument is Iran doesn't have a real nuclear weapons program. They've been sitting at 60% enriched uranium for ages. We've been told for 20 years they've had the ability to nuclearize. We've been told for 20 years they've had nuclear weapons. And again, all this intel has typically come from Israel and the Mossad. We are typically told when we get into these Middle East wars that these other enemies in the Middle East have nuclear weapons or they have the capability to nuclearize. This couldn't be further from the truth. Iran doesn't even have long-range missiles. They tried to launch two long-range missiles, I believe that for a destination around 3,000 kilometers away. The first missile got intercepted before it got even close, and the second missile didn't even come anywhere near the 3,000 target mark, or the 3,000 kilometer target mark. I don't know exactly when it went down, but it didn't come close. Essentially, it was just a show of force trying to show off their missiles, and it failed spectacularly. It doesn't matter what anybody says about Iran's missile capability. They aren't even close to nukes. So I don't understand why this is such a pressing point for the Americans. I don't understand why this is such a pressing point for everybody in the world who's supporting this war and waging war against Iran, because they do not have nuclear weapons and they couldn't be further from it. As well going off of that right now, like I said before, the entire point of the IRGC is when they go to war, they become fully decentralized. Their entire system is based upon the fact that when they go to war, they don't need a leader. If any leader is killed, there is a complete chain of command ready to take over. And it isn't like it's just one chain of command. It is essentially that every part of the IRGC breaks off into its own groups and they have their own leaders. It's like one pack of wolves splitting off into a dozen pack of wolves. I mean, it is impossible to keep track of all of them. It is impossible to keep fighting all of them, because not only is it just, again, one group in the IRGC, we're also fighting Hezbollah, we're also fighting Hamas, we're fighting every single one of their allied groups and proxies, and every single one of these terrorist groups that is in the Middle East, and it is just too big of a battlefield to contain. It isn't like America is not strong enough to destroy these groups. I mean, we could absolutely smite them in a second if we wanted to. But the casualties we'd cause to civilians in the Middle East, the infrastructure damage we would cause, and again, look at the Strait of Hormuz. The type of world slowdown to oil production and world economies that we're going to see if we do a full-on war and boots on the ground like we did in the early 2000s would decimate the world economy. And it would also decimate America at the exact same time. Our debt is far too big now for us to be able to get into these long forever wars in the Middle East. And Trump, once again, he knows that. That is why this war, if it is not wrapped up by the summer, again, I'll bite my tongue, but there's no way Trump doesn't get this wrapped up by the time midterms are in full swing, because then all of America will turn their back on him, and he knows it. It doesn't matter how pro-America you are. Looking at this war, it is hard to say and hard to find a reason to justify it being prolonged for so long. If we get into one of these wars, we have to get in and get out. That is what every American knows, and that's what every American wants. We do not want another forever war that we are constantly footing the bill for. Again, we just found out that in September of 2025, before this whole war kicked off, the Pentagon spent over $90 billion on essentially junk spending, because they had $90 billion left on their budget that they had to spend or it was going to be cut. And in these purchases was like $225 million worth of furniture. We're talking $10 million for ribeye steaks, $6 million for surf and turfs, lobster, and crab. We're talking ridiculous spending amounts, ridiculous balance sheet items that the taxpayers should not be footing the bill for. Again, I completely understand serving and feeding our troops, but we should really be paying the bill for Pete Hegseth's surf and turf in September? I don't think so. Again, this was pre-war. I don't think so, Mr. Pete. So I don't know what is happening going on over there. Again, everybody has had issues with this new Department of War, what we've been doing. And again, we've been doing a lot of these actions without Congress's approval. approval. And that's where a lot of people throw their hands up. Of course, there are two sides to every single argument and every single story. On one side, if we were to try to get Congress's approval for a war, we would be effectively telling Iran our plan way ahead of time and would take out the element of surprise in making an effective battle and an effective attack. So I can see the side on both sides for this and why people are not only upset with Trump not getting Congress's approval, but why on the other hand they can accept it. Personally, I think that in times of war like this, you don't necessarily need Congress's approval for every single action. Again, we did go to war. That is a very significant act, but I do believe that the president has the ability to go to war, and we do not need a full congressional authority for every single action. Even with the tariffs, I fully disagree with the Supreme Court's ruling that Trump's use of the IEEPA, essentially the Economic Powers Act, he was able to levy tariffs without Congress's approval, and the Supreme Court said, hey, that's unconstitutional. I fully disagree with that. Talking to Congress can sometimes delay up these processes and these tariff deals for months and sometimes even years. We wouldn't see any progress in a trade war for months, and it could take China just a day to levy tariffs on us. So our response has to be just as quick, and Congress delays that every single time. In my opinion, this absolutely follows a broader trend and pattern that the Supreme Court is constantly meddling in economic affairs it has no right being in and constantly messes them up. The Supreme Court had zero refund plan for all of the tariffs that ruled unconstitutional, which means that we have no idea as taxpayers how that money is going to be spent, if it's going to be sent back to the countries, and what that really means for the overall trade war. Again, the consumers are the ones that had to eat a lot of these tariff costs. Again, that's what a lot of people like to say, and that was the headlines on a lot of things, when in reality, we don't exactly know the true numbers due to how inflation has been and how rampant inflation has been. But again, the consumers at a base level did have to pay for these tariffs, and we do not know what is going to happen with the money that America made from us having to pay more, and that is unbelievable. Again, this follows a broader trend with campaign financing and corporation financing, where the Supreme Court has absolutely no idea how to properly rule on these cases, and every time it does, it just ruins it for the consumer and the taxpayer. But going back to the ceasefire, while the ceasefire and these peace talks were happening with J.D. Vance in Pakistan, Trump was at a UFC fight in Miami. Again, not that this is really a big dig at Trump, but we are currently at war. I'm not sure if being at a UFC event while our vice president is undergoing peace talks with our number one enemy in the world. I don't know if being at a UFC fight is necessarily the best look. Again, Trump typically does this. He typically acts in the worst fashion when you need him to act in the best fashion. So is this a surprise to anybody? Well, I hope not. It isn't a surprise to me. It's more so just laughable at this point. But again, this ceasefire falling apart is probably the worst thing that could happen for his presidency, because inflation is only going to continue to get worse. Again, just a couple days ago, not even about a day ago, we got the full year inflation expectations. Now we got an updated CPI report, and the CPI has jumped from under 1% inflation in the beginning of 2026 to now over 3% with the Iran war in full scale. Again, that whole reason is because we have seen super elevated gas prices. So every single item that is being shipped across the world now costs an exorbitant amount more. And it is only affecting consumers. It is only affecting the taxpayer. And right now, there is no plan from the Trump administration on how to combat inflation. Again, the ceasefire agreement was supposed to be the plan to try and get the Strait of Hormuz open, lower gas prices, and get inflation back under control. But with it now failing, and with J.D. Vance saying essentially Iran is still staying firm on their nuclear weapons program, when again, it's a bogus program. So why are we so firm on this when we need to get the Strait under control? I don't know what is going on. I believe that this is just, it is for some reason a stalled out game. America for some reason isn't fully committing to war, but we also aren't fully committing to peace. We're kind of in this middle ground, allowing Israel to continue their attacks on Iran's proxies. And again, we aren't doing anything. Stands the question, why did we get involved first? Every single day as this goes on, it seems like we don't have a plan more and more, and that we just jumped into battle. And that Pete Hegseth was probably correct in the first day of this war when he said Israel was going to preemptively attack Iran, so America just had to hop in. Again, Trump has refuted this claim, but I highly doubt that Trump refuting this claim has any sort of basis of truth, because Pete Hegseth said this on the first day, and this was essentially the first report that we got about this war, was from Pete Hegseth saying that Israel was going to preemptively attack and that America was just following their lead. And Trump said the exact opposite happened. He said that America was going to preemptively attack, so Israel actually hopped in. Again, completely conflicting reports because they're both probably lying, but Pete Hegseth, in my opinion, how this is all shaping up, it seemed like America was just thrown into this war. We have no end game, and nothing is shaping up like we were figuring out one. So when gas prices go back above $115 on Monday, again, my TikTok, my Instagram, my YouTube, I've been screaming that. I've been screaming that this ceasefire was going to fall apart. I hope you were positioned well. I had some longs positioned right now for crude oil. I also have some for gold. And right now, I'm not sure what's going to happen to tech and equity markets. We could see them plummet, or we could see them kind of stay at the same rate. Again, the stock market hasn't really been reacting the way it should to any sort of news recently. We've been seeing super bullish signals from the tech market, and we haven't seen really any sort of positive growth out of that sector in a little bit. It's kind of been very choppy up and down on the stock prices, so it's been a very interesting time. But right now, I do believe this is a prime time to be getting into investing. So make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel. Follow me on my TikTok. Follow me on my Instagram. I'm going to be covering this Iran war every single day and what's going on in the markets and how you have to be positioned correctly. Thank you so much for watching. And again, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode. Have a good one.